Hello and welcome to the Rover podcast. This week we're joined by myself, Phil, and also Indigo Buckler, second place silver medalist at the lightweight boat race this year. Uh, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Today we're talking about kind of sports performance, nutrition, and psychobiology, and that sort of ties in with your degree at Oxford a bit, doesn't it, Indigo? You do biology.
Yeah, so my degree is straight biology, but we kind of cover lots of different modules, including kind of physiology, and we can kind of take different routes through that. So you can kind of take a more psychological based route or social sciencey route or molecular biology route.
And I'd imagine you've done a fair bit of this sort of thing in the run up to the lightweight boat race as well. Um,
Yeah. So I'd say an advantage of being in the lightweight squad is that we have a lot of kind of nutrition advice and we have compulsory nutrition sessions. Um, and they're really helpful because they kind of break a few myths and give you kind of factual science about how your body uses the food you eat and stuff like that.
mhm. So that sort of leads straight on to our first topic. So what is your sort of perspective on sports nutrition compared to like the scientific perspective, or what's sort of previously been thought to be the ideal sort of sports nutrition? You've got some sort of different ideas on this, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. So basically, I think kind of the sports industry has quite a big kind of hype around sports diets and, like having lots of supplements and high protein diets and all these kind of like protein bars and different ways to eat. And there's so much advertising about this is the best diet. No, this is the best diet. But I'm actually very pro like food is food, and your body and your brain probably prefer like a banana to a kind of really artificially processed protein bar or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, so yeah, I guess I'm kind of more like organic, pro-organic biology than like super sciencey processed stuff.
And that's something that I'm sort of always telling the guys that I'm coaching as well. Like, essentially, if you're hungry, eat. And if you're like feeling sore, there's probably you need a bit more protein, maybe. If you're tired, eat more carbs. Like the more you like listen to your body, the more you're gonna get out of your food. Phil, you kind of take a different approach, don't you?
Uh, well, not particularly. I guess it's just there's ways you can maximize stuff. Um, yeah, but it is like it's easy. It's very easy to overcomplicate things.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, if in doubt, just try and keep it as simple as possible and eat a well-rounded, balanced diet, I guess.
So I mean, I could ask you guys, I guess like out of both of you, would you say you have different kinds of like high performance diets? Or do you eat relatively similarly?
I wouldn't say I've got a high performance diet. Uh, when I was younger, I really struggled to put on any weight, and as soon as I kind of got control of what I was eating, it was more of a eat as much as I possibly can, um, however it may be. And in 2021, I think it was, I didn't quite get that right and spent most of my summer eating just sugar to essentially get me by. Um, but in the last few years, I've kind of developed a bit and figured out how to maximize that a bit more. But Phil, I know you always have a tub of like protein powder in your cupboard, don't you?
Yeah, it's more like supplements are. It's gonna sound stupid, but like supplements should be used as supplements, right? Like and like a protein shake is useful like if you've just finished a session and you need to just get something straight away, it's easy to do. But like in an ideal world, you would just finish a session and then you'd already have like a massive plate of food waiting for you. But obviously that doesn't happen because you need to finish the session, then go and get changed and have a shower, then go home and then cook, and it just takes a while
Yeah.
to just speeds up the process.
I guess like I'm not anti protein powder necessarily. I think I'm just more a lot of the like is it, I don't know what brand you have, but a lot of the kind of advertised supplements have kind of loads of extra stuff in them, like even stuff with like creatine or like, I know, random sciencey looking things they just put on the box. And I think like the more, personally, I just feel like the more you interfere with your kind of natural body chemistry, the more you're likely to either kind of get dependent on that brand of food, or you're kind of going to mess up other things like your hunger regulation, your hormone release, which is another thing like I wanted to come on to. So like yeah, like I know that, say, a lot of supplements have loads of additives in them and things like that, which kind of change your natural response to eating those foods anyway. But
interesting.
I guess it's like pros and cons, because as you said, it's still important to get post training and post race fuel in. Although having said that, I have like a nutrition page up here, which is that so after training, I guess most of us probably have like a snack or something to refuel immediately after, and your body kind of absorbs that protein at a certain rate, so it goes like up really quickly. So like it takes in, say like it takes in protein quickly to a certain extent, but kind of the protein synthesis, so the amount your muscles recover at about 20 grams of protein, is very similar to the amount they recover after 40 grams. So I think basically like people tend to overeat protein a lot, and if anything, undereat carbs. So I think that's also one myth that I quite like to bust, like especially to a lot of like college rowers or people less familiar with like super high intensity sport.
So yeah, you've said in your notes here that also additional protein is converted to fat instead of extra muscle. So does that mean that essentially if we're overloading on protein, that's not going to good places?
Sadly, basically, yes. I mean, like your body does a lot with protein. So it, you know, the protein has plenty of places to go once your muscles have kind of stored the maximum they can store. But so I'm not saying it's all just gonna like turn into fat immediately, but at the same time, like if people tend to say like panic more about having too much pasta than too much protein or something, like I can't think of a protein source right now, but like if at the end of the day, if you have slightly too many complex carbohydrates, so yeah, like starchy foods like pasta and potato and rice and whatever, then your body will be more likely to convert that to glycogen, which is kind of, especially if you already do a lot of exercise, because your body then gets used to expecting exercise. So it's going to be like, oh, well, I don't care that I had too much pasta because I know I've got training tomorrow morning. So I'll just put it into glycogen storage so that I can like push harder tomorrow. Which it does actually do that. Whereas if it has too much protein, like your muscles only synthesize like the like use the protein to make the muscle fibers to a certain amount. So say like if you've overeaten, like if you've eaten more protein than your muscles can synthesize, then it has like it's not going to make more muscle, like because your muscles are formed from the glycogen breakdown, not from the protein. Yeah, basically, if that makes sense.
And
Yeah.
would you say as your body grows and as you get stronger and bigger muscles, you can then digest more proteins, or is that sort of same base level protein? Does that stay the same?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously your protein needs will increase with your body mass and your muscle mass. So yeah, I think there's probably like a formula somewhere that you can like calculate how much protein you need per like minutes of high intensity training or something.
I think it's usually done 1 gram per pound of body weight, or
That sounds about right.
yeah, or like
Yeah.
1.5 times or per kilo. I think it's like
Yeah,
the
I think
upper
I've
and
heard
lower
that
limit.
before as well. Yeah.
But it
I mean,
is very,
I'm all for protein.
yeah, it is very classic for people to overeat on protein, like especially men as well, thinking just get as much protein in as possible to get as big as you can as possible. It's not necessarily the case. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, I think a lot of people tend to be afraid of kind of eating too many carbs, especially if, say, you're trying to get lean or something like that. But actually, carbohydrates, and I was going to come onto this with like fats and sugar as well, like they have loads of super important functions for actually regulating your metabolism and your hunger. So there have been like quite a few studies showing that no matter what, like that someone's kind of, if someone has like a lower fat diet and low sugar diet, but the same calories as someone with a higher fat or high sugar diet, then the person on the low fat diet will like struggle to lose weight or like change their weight in the way they want faster, because it just changes your kind of brain's perception of how to regulate your metabolism. Whereas if you kind of eat normally, but like fewer calories or like train harder or something, then your body kind of knows what to do with that like information.
Does the type of fats and sugars count towards different like types of digestion? Because obviously you get sugar from a packet of Haribo's, or you can get sugar from a banana, and equally you can get fat from a hamburger, or you can get fat from a spoonful of peanut butter. So
Yeah.
do they affect how you digest it and where it goes?
Yeah, like yeah, basically the short answer is yes. The kind of fats that are good are the kind of classic like polyunsaturated fats, so and like high omega-3 fats. So like having oily fish or like olive oil, I don't know, that sort of stuff, rather than like butter or animal fats. And then yeah, obviously sugar, like your body kind of metabolizes fructose differently to
Sucrose?
like sucrose, yeah, that's what I was thinking. So like there are some, even in fruits and like say like sweets and stuff, depending on what kind of sugar you have, your body will kind of process it differently. But having said that, with fat, I think it's like your body kind of responds a lot more to the ratio of unsaturated to saturated fat than it does to the kind of raw amount, because if you have like enough unsaturated fat in your bloodstream, then your cholesterol levels can kind of remove the saturated fat cholesterol. If that's what I think is true. I might also just use that as an excuse to eat way too much Nutella. But as long as I match it with like a tablespoon and a half of peanut butter, then we're all good. So yeah, I think that that's the case. I think yeah, I just wouldn't be afraid of it. Like I think obviously don't like, I'm very, is it keto? Like the diet that's like you cut carbs and is like high fat.
Yeah.
I'm equally anti that, because again, like the fats can't substitute for carbs. Like your body literally has, we've like evolved to process those food groups for a reason. Which is why in a way, like I'm also very kind of pro like things like kind of ice cream, or like even if it's like an unhealthy fat like butter, dairy, like it doesn't necessarily have to be healthy, but I think your body is just going to know what to do with a kind of more natural product compared to something like Haribo's or like Mackey's.
Having said that, there is like, is it like 1 in 3 people are lactose intolerant? Is there a gain from eating butter and milk and things like that if you're lactose intolerant? Because obviously your body struggles to digest it.
Sorry, if you're lactose intolerant, just to clarify, please do not go and eat huge amounts of dairy. Actually, there was one, because I'm like slightly lactose intolerant, and then there was one session in the winter where I actually had to get out of the boat halfway through and just miss the second session because I was like having issues after having like an entire tub of Ben and Jerry's the night before. So do not do that. But vegan Ben and Jerry's is on offer in Sainsbury's highly regularly, and can recommend several flavors. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, like the whole like lactose, like a lot of people are lactose intolerant. But I would also say these days it's actually much easier to, like, there are so many more kind of substitutes on offer for kind of dairy-free options and stuff than there were like a few years ago. But I still find it like, yeah, with meat, I think it's quite hard because you can, I think as a student as well, there's a balance between having healthy food and like easy food, especially when it's like I don't have the hours in my day to like cook a really healthy roast dinner. Like sometimes
Yeah.
I just need to get something in. So that's also fair, like
And
student.
something that I've read about and learned about recently is is there 7 amino acids, is that right? Or there are 7 vital amino acids that you need to have in a certain balance with each other in order to get like a proper
Yeah.
amount of protein in. So there's no point eating. That's where the sort of whey protein argument comes from, that you shouldn't just eat whey protein because you can top out on the amino acid that's in whey, but if you don't have the other ones, then there's not much point in having it. Do you know about that, or do you have any?
Yeah, so you have, I know, like there are 20 different amino acids, but the body only can, like, I think you have to get 7 essential ones from your diet. And so because your body can't synthesize them, so the others, I think your body can kind of from other stuff like make by itself, but there are at least 7, I think, which you have to get from your diet. So yeah, you're basically exactly right with that. Like if you have too much of one thing, in a lot of cases it doesn't necessarily compensate for not having the other thing. Like I think it's just not all as simple as like calories in, calories out, because your kind of body is controlled by so many extra kind of little proteins and chemicals and metabolites and stuff.
Yeah, and I know there's about 1,000 calories in a cheesecake, and I definitely don't feel like if I'd done 1,000 calories worth of exercise, then smash one of those, I probably wouldn't be feeling so hot. But yeah, so I do agree with that in terms of calories in for calories out. There's definitely different types of calories for calories. But having said that, I think it is important to, again, not overcomplicate it. And calories in for out is obviously a very easy way of keeping track of it. And obviously, if you're in a deficit, you're probably more likely to lose weight. And if you're in a excess, then you're more likely to gain weight. Just because it's a good way of measuring how much energy you're putting into your body and how much energy you're losing. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. Like I think, say within, it's useful, as you said, like I think it's most useful in a kind of very broad context. So kind of generally like, yeah, as you said, like within a couple of hundred each way. But as you said, like I think it can be useful if you don't know, like if you're actually trying to achieve like a specific goal or you're trying to control your weight. So say in the lightweight squad, like if you know that there's a specific weight range that you're aiming for, it's quite useful to kind of be aware of calories maybe, like, and I think the useful thing about calories like now is more to be aware of them on foods that you didn't know were super high in calories or something like that. So like I know I might be, as you said, like I might be used to consuming like, I know, 400 grams of something and then not realize that was actually like 3,000 calories in one go and be like, oh, no wonder I'm kind of struggling to get down to this weight target or something. But at the same time, I also believe that, I don't know, as you said, like personally, I've just had loads of kind of things that like defy the calorie science happen to me. Like I know that, say, a tub of ice cream is a certain amount of calories, but I just don't really feel that full after having a certain amount sometimes and stuff. But then I think, I know, because your body, like generally, I think the most accurate way to measure calories in, calories out, and how your body processes it is if you kind of look at it as a weekly average rather than like a daily average. So quite often people focus on how many calories they're eating in a day and then be like, oh, why have I gained weight? I had so few calories that day. But actually, if you kind of look at your trend of eating over a week, what I realized, because like say my friends might be like, Indigo, like, how are you at this? How are you lightweight? Like you eat like this and stuff. And it's like, oh, well, actually, I realized like for every day I eat super, super, super unhealthily and have like 5,000 calories. There's like one day where I kind of have far less and just eat very healthily. So like that kind of balances it out, which is kind of masked if you spend every day focusing on the kind of exact calorie intake.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still useful.
I guess that also comes from genetics as well and metabolic rate. And you've sort of written here as well about 70 to 80% of your body shape is controlled by genetics and can't be changed. So can you go a bit deeper into that potentially?
Yeah, I know. Coming from an all-girls school, that was something that, oh, sorry, I was probably gonna be cancelled just saying that. But it was a sad revelation for a lot of us. But basically, a lot. So just to clarify, like, there's a difference between like your body weight and your body shape. So obviously, you're like, to a certain extent, your weight can always be controlled by your diet, because as you said, like if you just, I don't know, eat too much or too little, then it will change. But like your actual shape is genuinely, like, at least for most people, it varies, but it's at least like going to be 65-70% genetic, which means like the genes, like you like, as soon as you're kind of, I know, as soon as you're like formed, as soon as you're like a little fertilized zygote inside your mother's womb, then like that is like your DNA set for life. Like it genuinely just replicates, and like I don't know, like, you know, every cell in your body has the same DNA. Like the only thing that changes between different cells is like which genes are expressed, which is why height is so genetic as well. Like I think it's like many genes control height, but to a certain extent, like, and so you could, like, your diet can influence your height based on like which genes are switched on and off, but you just can't change it. Like I can't change the genes I have in my cells. So it's kind of the same thing with your body shape. Like everyone has like a slightly different shape that they're like, it's to do with the way your cells will replicate and like reproduce like inside your body, or like, I don't know, just generally end up in, like, everyone has a like unique body shape. But basically I think what I wanted to touch on with that point was that I think there's a lot of perception around diet and nutrition that you can, like, people do change their diet and nutrition to like change how they look, even in sports. If you're like, oh yeah, I need to get lean for summer, like it doesn't always have to be performance focused. It can also be very kind of like personal and like, oh yeah, actually I just want to look a certain way. And so I think with facts like that, it kind of reminds you that like you might need to just like is in like, I'm trying to explain it, like you can't, there's only a certain amount you can control with your nutrition. Like you can't, you know, I'll never be like, no matter how much or little I eat, I'll never be able to like make myself grow 5 inches. So it's kind of like that, basically, is what I was trying to say, from a kind of, especially in sports, in women's sports as well, where there's like unfortunately still a lot of pressure to like look a certain way as well as perform a certain way. It's just quite helpful to be like, especially when you see some athletes that are like really criticized for their for their body shape and how they look. It's like, well, you know, she might look a certain way, but that doesn't change her performance outcome because she's bloody fit and strong. So like that's, you know, irrelevant, basically.
Yeah.
Genetically, everyone also has like an optimum body size that is just their like really optimal size for like brain function. Like I know, like for some people, I know it's like some, as you said, like you just might know someone with like tiny calves and they're not like really starving, they just naturally have tiny calves. And so like in that sense, that's like a natural thing. It does not mean it's like unhealthy for them, and it also doesn't mean their calves are weak. It just means that is like their genetically determined size. And then, as you said, like, you'll find that the more you try and change that, so the more you try and resist like your natural predisposition, the more you'll have to train to get a certain like calf mass that someone else might never train calves once in their life and just naturally wake up with every morning. Whereas if that person with small calves wants to get that calf mass, they're like there 4 hours a day just doing training calves. So, which is why I think, like, in a sense of time and like feeling confident about yourself as well, it's helpful to be like, yeah, like, you know, I can function like this. I don't need to, like, I can't change how I look this way, but it doesn't mean that I'm not still functioning very well and I'm not still performing very well.
Something that we've not talked about much yet that I'm actually quite interested in as well is gut health and sort of how your gut functions towards digestion. And also, I know there's new studies that say it's got a lot more to do with like our brain function as well and all that sort of stuff. So it's actually hits a lot of points that we've sort of mentioned today, but we've not sort of gone around to that. So do you have some stuff to talk about with gut health?
Yeah, I do actually. I hope you liked my fun facts. I will say them now. So the first fun fact is that a human body hosts 10 times more bacterial cells than human cells. So that's around 100 trillion bacterial cells and around 10 trillion human cells. So in many ways, you're actually more bacteria than human. Just a fun fact. And so the different organs of your body will have like their own microbiomes, but your gut microbiome specifically actually weighs around 2 kilos. So that's like a lot of like microorganisms living and just vibing inside you. And basically the first thing to take from that is that they're really, really important for your health, because if they weren't, they just wouldn't exist. And they're also part of our biology, like they've evolved with us for millions of years. And basically you just need to look after them. Like, and so I'd say like that's another thing coming onto nutrition. Like people are kind of just discovering now that what you eat can really heavily affect your gut microbiome, which has kind of secondary effects then on your weight, your immunity, your mental health, like just because your gut microbiome is responsible for kind of digesting and like metabolizing quite a lot of like molecules and stuff that your body, your human cells can't. So if you then kill those cells, say or like you don't fuel them enough, then you'll kind of end up, like you can struggle in other ways. Like I think they have found like a link with like the gut microbiome to anxiety and depression actually, which is really interesting. But I guess, I guess like because the bacterial cells and like your microbiomes are like a living thing, the kind of chemicals and proteins that it releases will interact with the human ones, and therefore like it has a kind of function. And then what was the other thing? I mean, I would say also the main thing about like looking after your microbiome is probably where it has the biggest impact is on your immunity. So if you kind of don't eat enough, or like kind of say things like omega-3, which are really good, like omega-3 fatty acids are really good for your gut microbiome. So say I was having like a low fat diet or a low omega-3 diet, and like certain species of your gut microbiome, if they kind of decrease in frequency, so if they die out, then that kind of makes your body more vulnerable to kind of infectious bacteria. So sometimes people will be like, so for example, a classic example is like if you're on antibiotics for like one infection, because antibiotics just kill all of your bacteria, it then means that you could get like loads of other stuff like colds or like you're just a lot more vulnerable to other infections, even though you're kind of killing one, because you're kind of indirectly killing all of the good stuff, which protects you from the bad stuff, if that makes sense.
And I know something, if you're taking antibiotics, they sort of recommend you have Actimel or Yakult or that sort of thing. And something I've seen coming from the shops a bit more recently is kefir shakes. Is that, I don't know if you've heard of those, but do you know anything
Yeah, I
about
mean,
those?
I thought kefir is just a kind of Asian type of dairy drink. Like, I don't know if it has a specific function. I just thought it's normal to drink after a meal in certain cultures.
Okay.
But I might be wrong.
From what I
Yeah.
understood, it was used to sort of promote gut health. So yeah, it's sort of just a fermented lactose. So it's
Yeah.
so I guess it's pretty much the same as like Yakult and that sort of thing. It's just and yogurt essentially. So it is
Yeah, because
just
I guess it's still the same, like it's still the same ingredients that your like your body would produce. I guess it's just increasing the speed of that reaction because it's kind of already done quite a lot of the work. But like, I mean, coming on to the topic of lactose intolerance and tolerance, that's another quite interesting kind of aspect of control you can have over your gut microbiome, because I know that, say, if someone is dairy free for long enough, then because the kind of bacteria in their body that usually help digest the lactose kind of die out, it means that, say, after like 6 years, 7 years of being dairy free, if I suddenly like drank loads of milk, I would like suddenly get really ill, because I'd think, because my body essentially becomes lactose intolerant, even if it was like a genuine dietary choice and not a biological thing, it kind of then becomes a biological thing because your bacteria just don't know, like they play such an important role in digesting it, and then they've all died out, so then you just can't. Yeah,
and
which
that
is interesting, I
actually,
think.
yeah, that happened to our cocks. I think it was like the week before Henley. We'd he'd been I think he'd been vegan for a couple months, basically trying to get the weight down, trying to lose weight. And then one evening we made lasagna as a house, and he thought he'd tuck in to be polite. And the next day, or the next week even, he was violently ill just because he'd
Oh,
had
no.
like a lot of cheese all in one
Is
evening.
Is that Will?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a massive shock
Oh,
to the system,
not
basically.
Coach Will.
Yeah.
Oh, he coaches you, doesn't he?
Out, Coach. Yeah, he coaches in Hughes. Yeah, but I mean, on the topic of veganism, that is another like interesting nutrition thing, because I think like veganism like has obviously a reputation for kind of being very restrictive and like a weight loss diet or something like that. But in the end, like when people lose weight on a vegan diet, it's mostly just because of the like they're just not consuming enough calories. Because you just need to get, like, you just have to eat such a high volume of food to get the same calories. So it's not that a vegan diet in itself is very restrictive. Like, I don't think. I think vegan diets can be like really yummy and healthy and like not like they don't deserve a bad reputation or anything. But I think you just need to just eat so much to like get the same calories as like a meat burger. You need like 3 vegan ones.
Shall we move on slightly to the more psychobiology side of things?
Yeah, I'm very happy to do that.
I guess we could start off with your definition of psychobiology.
Yeah, I guess it sounds like quite a niche statement. Basically, like what I mean by psychobiology is how your brain, so your psychology and like kind of your consciousness in a way, can kind of influence your physiology and your kind of biological response. So kind of the brain body connection, like mind over muscle. That's all sounding very philosophical, but like interestingly, like, so my approach to neurology and like kind of neuroscience is that, like, at the end of the day, your brain is an organ, like it's a physical entity, and like all of our thoughts, as weird as it is, are like physical entities. They're literally like chemicals like rushing around. So I think we've got like 86 trillion neurons or something like that. So they are like physical things, like they exist and they have physical effects on the rest of your body. And I guess like it's easy to look at performance and say that like, oh, I'm like everything that my leg is doing is coming from my leg, but actually like everything that all of your self-directed exercise actually goes through your brain first. Like it goes from your brain down to your leg and then back up to your brain again. Like it doesn't just go straight to the muscle unless it's a reflex action. But yeah, so I guess psychobiology is the science of how your brain impacts your physiology and your kind of the rest of your body in that sense.
Would you say that you can develop reflexes? This isn't on the list, but I was just curious.
I know, me too. As I said that, I was like, oh, what if sweep throwing just became a reflex action?
Yeah. So yeah, because
I think I've developed some unhealthy reflexes, like looking at my blade, to be fair, but sorry, that was extra. Yeah, I guess you can definitely be habituated, like, or no, that's the opposite of a reflex. Like you can definitely train your body to expect certain actions, right? Like you can, like muscle memory is also a real thing, but muscle memory it's not like, it's different to a reflex in that a reflex is to do with the neural circuit that your brain has formed. So it's to do with like neuron to brain, brain to muscle. Whereas muscle memory is to do with changing the proportion of muscle fibers. So it's like if your body gets used to exercising in a certain way, then the specific kind of combination and ratio of different muscle types will be so specific that is why you get really, really good at that exercise, rather than because your brain is just remembering it. I think sadly for most of us, considering your brain stops making new brain cells when you're about 6 years old, I don't know if it's possible to like make new reflexes, but you can definitely strengthen, like I guess you can strengthen reflexes. Like you can, the more often a pathway gets fired in your brain, the stronger it will be. So like the more often you have to use a reflex, the easier it'll get, I guess.
So if I was about to capsize and my reflex was to sort of lean over and grab my blade handle and that sort of thing, that's not a reflex. That's what would that be?
No, I guess it is a reflex in that sense. Like anything that is kind of a subconscious thing that you do, could probably be defined as a reflex, I guess. Especially if it's quick and in an emergency situation.
Well, it's a split-second decision, isn't it? It's fight or flight. It comes back to the fight or flight, doesn't it? Like,
yeah, fight, flight, or freeze. I'm quite pro freeze because I think I freeze quite a lot. But yeah, no, it's interesting, I guess. Like in sports, especially, I think it's interesting how like specifically you can train your brain. So coming back to kind of psychobiology and how your kind of perception, it's psychobiology in sport, so how your kind of perception of your sport ability changes how much you physically exert yourself, I find really interesting. So just as a like little example, I don't know how scientific this is, to be fair. Like it was over the Christmas vac, I was like training in Pure Gym and I was doing a spin class, mainly because it was the only place where the bikes were and there just happened to be one at the same time. So I was like, okay, might as well do it. And I noticed that like literally within 10 minutes of this like spin class, I was the only one that was like literally dying. Like I was sweating, I was like dead. I was like, this is so horrible. And like there were people there who, like, to put it in the nicest way, I don't think some people were like training for a boat race. Like and I don't think they had much experience training for a boat race either. And I was like, how am I dying more than them? Like surely I can't be less fit than them. And then I realized that like it's because when you're so used to pushing yourself that much, then your body gets so good at like producing those physiological reactions. Like my body is so good at kind of recognizing when to start like giving my brain the feedback that I am like sweating, like that I do need to sweat more because my body temperature's come up or my heart rate's come up and stuff like that, then like I'm just more used to it. And that is like a very psychological thing that happens over time that like is quite specific to athletes, I think.
Yeah.
Would
I
you
think
say
you go.
would you say your pain threshold increases as well then with more sport? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Like it was interesting for me because I was like, oh, maybe it's like one thing I tell like kind of college rowers as well is that kind of the more you erg, and it's like the more you get used to gradually increasing that pain threshold and saying like, right, I can push myself this much, the more likely I think you are going to, because you kind of know you can. So like I think it's that psychology of like, I know I can do it, therefore like I will do it because I've done it before or something like that. And I think, yeah, like once you get used to kind of setting yourself that standard as well, it's like, oh, well, I don't feel like I've exercised enough unless I do like this certain amount, compared to someone who kind of, if you've only ever given up as soon as you get out of breath, then you're not going to know how to like keep going.
Yeah. Okay.
And something you sort of put in your notes here as well is how much does our brain, how much control does our brain have over our body? So that's kind of on that topic as well. And you've put in that your brain can change your physical biological responses. Could you explain that a bit?
Yeah. So that like that has like kind of, that can be linked to loads of stuff. Like your brain kind of controls like a lot of your biology. But a lot of that, like, so you have two kind of types of, I know, I guess like I'm trying to think of the word for it. So you have like your nerves and like your neurons and like your fast biological responses, and then you also have like your hormones and stuff like that, which are still kind of responses, but they're just kind of slow acting. So I guess like a classic example of how much your brain can like actually change your response to something is say like adrenaline, right? Like adrenaline is like a purely psychologically active hormone. So in that, like, it's kind of activated by kind of your own psychological perception of a situation. But then like your body literally changes, like, you know, your heart rate goes up, like you start like sweating, thinking you're really thirsty and stuff like that, which is kind of all just your brain like controlling that. Like, I mean, it's not directly your brain, it's adrenaline, but like your brain activates the adrenaline. Yeah, so I guess when I said like a lot of it wouldn't be like your brain having this superpower that just changes your body. It's more like your brain can switch on a lot of different like chemicals and neural circuits and like hormones and stuff that you weren't really aware of.
Okay. And then you've also said that your brain sends pain signals when you're exercising. So it's your brain telling you that you're hurting rather than you being in actual pain?
Yeah, so I guess coming back to like your pain threshold and stuff, the truth, so like when your muscles do activity, like obviously you make lactate and like lactic acid and stuff, and the lactic acid goes into your bloodstream and your brain picks it up. So it's not, so it's like actually the pathway is that like your muscles produce the lactate, and then actually technically it's like starts with your brain sending signals to your muscles to work. So you're like, okay, legs work, then your muscles start working, your muscles produce the lactate, then your brain actually detects the lactate, and then your brain sends signals back down to your muscles that like that and your brain that like you're like it tells you that you're fatiguing and like tries to slow down your muscle output because that's why you feel the pain, because it's like, oh well, like I don't want to get tired, I don't want to fatigue, so let's decrease. So the more pain you're in, the more likely you're going to stop. So like it exists for a reason. Like I put a few kind of, obviously from an evolutionary perspective, like in the past your brain wouldn't want to overexert, like, so there's always that kind of emergency energy storage there and to like keep your immune system up and things like that. But in sports it obviously becomes an issue and it's like, I don't want to feel tired now, but I'm just dying. And yeah, so like ultimately, like I don't know if you could say like I I don't know if I sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, like before I do an like to the girls, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna gaslight myself into not being tired this time. And like sometimes it does work. Like as I've kind of put in the notes, your brain will calculate a perception of how much it can exert in a given exercise before you do it, which I find really interesting. Like I don't actually know the specific like molecular biology of it, but I don't know. I definitely relate to it. Like I know that if I'm doing 8 500s, I will like hate the 5th, 6th, and 7th ones. But then at the same time, like I could, if someone had said I was doing 12, I would feel fine at the 5th, 6th, and 7th ones. Like even if like the splits were the same, everything else was the same. So I don't know if you guys have felt like you've ever experienced something like that.
Well, I mean, every weekend we always do either 1 or 2 pieces, and I guess no matter how many pieces it is, it's always going to hurt the same amount. Like we could do or like 4 or 5 pieces at Wimbledon on our training camp, and I mean it doesn't necessarily hurt more than when we do 1 on our home stretch, just because I guess we're prepared to do 4 of them instead of 1.
Yeah, it's when you're approaching however many pieces or whatever you're doing or reps or whatever, it's like whenever you're approaching the finish, your brain knows that like the end is nigh.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're like you're almost there and you're willing it to be over quicker, basically.
Basically that's what I meant. So like even though, as you said, like even though the pain is going to be the same at each piece, like I just find it interesting that it's like no matter what the piece is, when I'm kind of 70 to 80% of the way there, I would just start dying. And I'm like, how does this happen, whether it's like a 2K or a 6K? Like and it's because your brain is calculating how long it has, and then it's like, okay, well, we need to save this emergency storage up. Which is why like the more you visualize the distance and the better you get at practicing that distance, like the easier it will get, because your brain gets used to knowing that actually it is okay to push yourself. Like you will survive, you will not faint before the finish in some cases.
Touchy subject. And you've also mentioned here about placebo and how that can affect training. So I guess that ties into the sort of 70% way through a piece as well. Like if you were halfway through and then suddenly your coach said, actually, we're doing 30 more, like I'm sure that would probably hit you pretty hard. Is that all in your head?
Yeah, I know. I think like it's still a very new topic, and I've heard I didn't put this in the notes because like I still think there's a lot of science, there's like a lot of bad science going around in it, because I also heard somewhere that apparently like at any one time, like I like apparently, there's some science going around that is like lactic acid actually doesn't, like your muscles aren't fatigued when a certain lactate concentration is really high, but we use the lactate to think that our muscles are fatigued, but actually they're not. But I know that there's lots of like dodgy experiments around that. But I do know that like it takes a lot for all of your muscle fibers to be engaged. So like usually you'll start feeling pretty exhausted when about like 80% of them are engaged. So that will be like dying. And then at any one time you always have like an emergency storage there ready to go. And then I think in sport it's just gradually increasing that, like percent by percent by percent. And And yeah, like the placebo effect is super cool, I think, because it occurs in everything. Like it occurs in like diet, with drugs, with, I don't know, so many different things. And especially in sports, like I think there are loads of examples of people kind of going in, like kind of the example I put is when like a cyclist was the Tour de France, like thought that his physio had given him this kind of performance enhancing drug, but actually had just injected, because he asked him to, but actually just injected him with like sugar and water. But because he thought that he had got this super drug in him, like he just went so much faster and like got a PB and stuff. But that was like purely just his own brain. But I think the placebo effect therefore is probably related to what I was saying before about like it probably increases your perception of how far you can go. So it's like, if I'm feeling really good today, then I'll be more likely to get a PB just because I think I'm feeling really good, even if biologically I'm like my body's the same as yesterday. I don't know.
That's interesting, because I think there's definitely levels to, so I know a lot of people have like Red Bulls and things like that before races. But if you're doing a super long race like Head of the River, where it's sort of 7K long, is caffeine going to stay in your system for, or at its peak for that whole race, or is that just you thinking that, okay, I've had my Red Bull, I'm ready to race now, and things like that as well? And also, if like a race gets delayed, you've timed it so that your caffeine is going to be in your system sort of an hour after you've taken it, and then the race gets delayed by 2 hours. But equally, I know if these people don't have their caffeine before races, that would definitely throw them off.
Yeah. Well, yeah, coming into psychobiology and sports and like that sort of thing, that's another thing I find really interesting, that like like sometimes these kind of routines that we have might not have any kind of scientific basis behind them. As you said, like literally the caffeine is only going to be effective for like 5 minutes of that race, but like at the same time, the effect it has in your personal kind of sense of calm at the start line, or like your sense of how much you've prepared, then in the long term, like maybe it does make you race faster. Like I mean, I know that I definitely have loads of superstitious things I like to do before races, or like I know pre-race foods that are probably no more or less healthy than other pre-race foods, but I'm like, I have to have this one because it's like my go-to. So I guess like
I have read in places that athletes are known to be the most superstitious people on the planet, other than Christians, I think it was. Which is interesting. So
I love that.
Religion and then athletes.
And Burrow's at the top, obviously. That's so funny. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I feel like especially in rowing, because like I've done quite a few sports, like I know most people have, like when you're in school and stuff like that. But I feel like in rowing, because it's so crew based, I think you get used to feeling like the vibe of the boat at that time. And then I don't know how it is at your level, like I'm pretty sure you're kind of just a couple of steps above, but I know that there are, say, some races or some outings where like if the feel of the boat is off for some reason, like that definition can change all the time, then people in the boat just panic, and then like everyone rows shitly. Like everyone always has shit outings. Sorry, I just thought, sorry.
That's fine.
Everyone always has bad outings. But like interestingly, like I think sometimes say in my crew, we've had outings where we've done a session and all of us got out and like, that was awful, like that was terrible. No one was feeling the boat, no one was responding, we weren't together, and then our coaches come over and be like, wow, that was so good, like you were so quick, and we're like, wow, really? Like, and it's because like I know the feel of the boat is so important to how you actually, well, I don't know, in a sport, like how you think you were doing is so important to how you actually do. I don't know. I mean, how you were, Ben, were you just in San Diego racing the Crew Classic?
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that. Like, that was definitely the nicest feeling boat we've rowed in a while. And I think what didn't quite go to plan was that I guess there was quite a lot of switching around, and there wasn't. We sort of went into it thinking, yeah, this is going really, really well, to the point where potentially we didn't change anything that needed to be changed. So maybe there's sort of the other side of the page there as well, where we're thinking, okay, it's feeling really good, and sort of ignoring the fact that it might not actually be that good. And I know something that a lot of us tend to do is, if it's feeling bad and it's 3 days before a race and you've flown across half the world to get there, and everyone's going, oh, it's feeling crap. You don't want to sort of say, oh, it's feeling crap, because everyone's going to get rattled and it's going to get worse. So you sort of push to the back of your head, or it's feeling really, really good. It's feeling really good. And you're telling everyone it's feeling really good, and sort of whether it is or not is potentially not voiced.
Yeah, definitely. As someone who has just obtained a silver boat race medal, I can relate. I think it's hard because, yeah, that's the thing I find in rowing that is interesting, where it's like you don't want to get other people down, and you don't want to voice the kind of fears you have because you know the effect it will have. So I guess like it's about finding a balance. But then on the other hand, it's like, I know sometimes I feel like we've had sessions where they've just been like a normal everyday session, like on a Saturday morning and sun shining, and because everyone's so relaxed, especially in rowing, where like that tends to help your technique, like the boat just goes so much faster than when everyone's, I know if there's a session where like, say we know that we're going to be tested or something, and everyone's really tense, and then everyone just ends up rowing shitly because they're like stressed about rowing shitly. Whereas if you whereas sometimes it's like the sessions you never expected to be really fast on, you're just super fast. But I mean, I was wondering, like, did you find it interesting, because I know like the kind of Brooks boats have had a lot of success in the head races, where it's kind of, and in fixtures where it's been very much like several lengths ahead, so you haven't had that kind of side-by-side feeling. So like, how did you find the kind of very intense side-by-side psychology of, like, how did you find racing like so close compared to the other races in
I think it's probably a bit easier because we all have screens in the boat telling you how hard you're pulling, and we know what number needs to be on that screen for every point of the race. So whether there's a boat next to you or not, it doesn't really matter, because if you're sat on your number and you're pulling the number that you said you were going to pull, you know the boat's going to go a certain speed. And if the boat next to you is going faster than you, there's not much you can do about that. So it's kind of, we got beaten by a crew that was just better than us, which is a shame. And it's quite tough. Like, rowing is a sport where obviously 99% of the time, if someone's faster than you, they're going to get across the finish line before you. Obviously, the most recent men's boat race, Jasper did some pretty ballsy steering that sort of, you could say, won them the race. But I think for the most part, like, it is bigger, faster crew goes fastest. And it's also sort of, when you're looking at the screen in front of you and it's saying you're pulling exactly this hard, and you can try and pull harder or you can try and pull softer, but it's going to tell you exactly what you're doing all the time. So there's no sort of hiding from that. Like, a footballer could have a bad match and someone's not looking at him and they could just get away from it. But in rowing, it's like, okay, that person's not getting their blade in and that person's not pulling hard, and that number in front of them says that. So that's quite an interesting thing. Like, there's not really any hiding from it. So if something's going badly, like, yeah, that's how it is.
Yeah, I guess it'd be interesting to look at that. I think, say, maybe in like the topic of psychobiology, in that sense, maybe your boats and like the Brooks squads have, maybe it probably has a much smaller effect, just because you, as you said, you're chasing your own personal number. So maybe, I don't know if you have, like, say if you think your cox is like steering aside, like independently of steering, if like your cox would make a massive difference to your speed. Whereas I know that for, say, in my squad, like, we don't have telemetry, so I guess it's much more reliant on like how you actually think you're doing, because we don't know how we're actually doing. So it's like, I need to know, like, I need to, have a cock screaming at me these calls, or I need to feel my blade go in nicely to know that I'm doing okay, like, because I don't have a number there.
Yeah, and it is interesting because obviously I have raced without telemetry, and we've just got races coming up actually where we're in the pairs where we don't have telemetry that we put on the pairs. So and most of the time Brooks do just as well without telemetry, and obviously sort of races where we're racing not for Brooks. So a lot of us went to Worlds and Europeans and things like that where we didn't have telemetry on the boats, and we got a world best time, and the 8 also won and got a gold medal at Worlds. And it's sort of just maybe we kind of just learn what we can do and what we can't do without those numbers in front of us as well. And obviously it's very nice if you're in front of a boat and you can see you're pushing away from them because you are that faster crew. But equally, it's also kind of knowing your own pacing and not reacting to the boats. So I know our race particularly, we knew if we were level with the other crews at the 1K mark, we were going to win because they always had the faster starts, but we had the better pacing. So we knew that if we were level with them at the 1K, like we were going to come through and beat them, which luckily we were ahead at the 1K and ended up beating them by more than we were expecting. But similarly, if you watch any of our Henley races from last year, like we were down, I think even on the Tuesday against Durham B, they beat us in the first like 10 strokes because we knew that we didn't have to push hard and we didn't have to like give it everything in the first 10 strokes because there were 200 more strokes after that where we could take them over and get what we wanted out of the race. So I guess it's that sort of stubbornness that helps us win races as opposed to anything else.
Yeah, like that's what I mean though. Like I think that is also quite psychology based. Like it's kind of the Brooke psychology of like trusting the power of the squad, like trusting your crew, which I find really big in rowing. And like especially because I learned to row in college as well. Like one of the biggest kind of transitions I felt psychologically was that like in college rowing you never, like I don't think I ever quite, because the kind of standards were so variable, I never quite trusted how much each person was pushing because there was so much variability. Like, so you know, was there someone in the boat that would just give up after 10 strokes? Like yes, there sometimes is. So it, and then suddenly you're in a squad and in a crew where you know that everyone is giving it 110%. And I think, yeah, as you said, like a lot of the Brooke success is like that trusting in like in your race strategy and in your power. I mean, like I know that for us, like say for the boat race, like we actually thought it would be a much closer race than it was. I mean, granted, like over 7K, just to clarify, like distances do stretch out, like probably would have been less than 6 lengths if it had been 2K, but like we were expecting it to be a close race, and obviously like we didn't know because like we couldn't see them, but I think psychologically like there have been examples of like there being a change in our boat speed just from everyone being like, oh, it's not what we expected, like whether that's for the better or for the worse. Like it's always interesting to see how the feel of a boat changes, I think. And I think, as you said, like maybe the better you are at kind of trusting in yourself, whatever happens. So like very much like heads in, like our boat, our race, like the better you'll do because you're not letting those things get to you.
Yeah.
When during the race, when you were down, what was your cock saying? Were they like telling you that you were gaining back or like still close to them or
See, that is a really good question. So because we also had told our cocks to like she had her own plan, like we, so because we'd like kind of gone through so many different race scenarios, we had a plan for if we're a certain amount of lengths down, or if we're a certain amount behind. So in that sense, I think our cocks did very well because basically she didn't say how far behind we actually were. Like I think the most she said we're behind was 2 lengths. And I think I'm glad that she did that because what it meant is I was basically thinking like until we were literally like over the line, I was basically like, oh, we could still win this. So I wasn't going to give up. Like I wasn't going to slacken off. I mean, I wouldn't have anyway, but like, you know, like I don't know. And I think even from a coxing, from like that really like made me admire Vicky, like our cox as well, because I think for us, like we were just going by the plan, like we're just going by what she's saying, because you're just like going through the motions. Whereas for her, like I don't know how she managed to keep everything together, because like she probably knew that we were going to lose much sooner than we did. And she kind of had to keep that together for us. So, you know, kudos to her. But yeah, no, she did lie. Like she was like, nope, you're like, we got out. And I was like, but I thought we were only like, how far are we behind? Like 2 lengths. She was like, no, just don't ask. I was like,
yeah, fair enough.
Something that Will's criminal for, saying we've got like 200 left when it's actually closer to 300. But if you're given it your last 200 meters and then you've got 100 meters left,
God.
Everyone's always got that 100 meters left in the tank, realistically.
That is also classic. Like I've definitely had like pieces where it's like, yeah, last minute, and I'm like, this is a long minute, like it's like quite a long, like 3 minutes. But yeah, that's what I mean. Like I guess that's why I find coxing interesting in terms of psychobiology as well, because it's literally all psychobiology. It's all like how that person's calls can change your output. Like it just proves that like you're not like, I don't know. I mean, I definitely know that like, and say with ergs as well, like my erg scores, as much as I think I'm like, I literally know that I might be giving it the same effort as I am, whether I'm by myself or in a crew, like, or in a group. But I know that if I have someone shouting at me, for whatever reason, the scores do come down. Like, and that is, I can't attribute that to anything else other than the presence of that person shouting at me.
And it's also things like when you're coming under the bridge, under like Hammersmith Bridge on head of the river, and you've got all the people up on the bridge like shouting at you. There's always a bit of a boost when you're going through parts of that, like, or if you're overtaking another crew in a head race, like the watts definitely go up and the speed definitely increases while you're overtaking, because there's sort of that visual cue saying you're going fast, well done, like carry on going.
Yeah, well, yeah, as you said, like I think it's I kind of like some of my best moments, like some of my kind of favorite memories from like the last season of rowing has definitely been when we've been kind of overtaking crews, and then it's like that feeling of like, yeah, like I am trusting our boat, like we are getting, like we are faster than them, like and actually, as you said, I think in terms of like coming back to like how maybe like the trust that Brooks has, like, and the Brooks success is that like there was in women's head of the river, we were kind of overtaking Newcastle for quite a lot of it, Newcastle C, just to clarify. And like but as a boat we weren't, because we knew the race was like almost 7 kilometers, we weren't panicked about like getting ahead of them in the first 1k. We knew that we'd caught up to them, we knew we were faster, and we were just like, yeah, okay, we know we're faster, we're going to overtake them. And then like we did. But I think one of the reasons we ended up doing it so neatly was because we were like, we trusted that we were faster and that we were going to eventually in the distance we had.
Yeah. Nice. So now it's time for the Q&A, and we got quite a few questions this week. We'll start with this one from Jake Winkham. Describe Oxrow in one word.
Well, I wouldn't say wholesome. Actually, maybe one word is hard.
Let's go for 3.
Okay. Unnecessary Oxford drama. There you go. Any of those 3 would also substitute as the one.
Yeah. I like unnecessary.
Next question. How do you feel now in Oxford compared to your first year, and maybe compare April 6th from both years?
Oh, good question. Well, I think first year was a bit of a whirlwind. I spent most of my first year hungover. Can't really lie. it was like a classic kind of, I don't know, Oxford's very intense. Like, I think, I don't know, a lot of it is kind of very normal uni experience, just like going out all the time, like meeting new people, getting really drunk. And I think is like, that's the normal experience. And then on top of it is like, oh, in my first year, I had 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. lectures every single day. So I had 9 to 11 lectures, and then 2 till 5 lectures, and then labs 3 times a week, 1 essay a week, and 1 tutorial a week. Just to clarify, I didn't attend all of that, but I guess like knowing it's there and you're getting behind is like long. Whereas now I've had a really chill year academically, probably too chill. And I've kind of been able to enjoy stuff like the rowing more. Rowing wise, like, I think one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't actually trial for or like join uni rowing until my 3rd year. Whereas I think if I could go back in time, I definitely would have done it now. So like literally around this time, 1st year, I would have started Dev Squad. Just because I think college rowing gets you to a point, and then there was a point at which like genuinely over about 3 years, I don't think my rowing changed, and I don't think my speed like improved at all. Like, I think it was just like, oh, I know how to not crab, and then nothing changed. Like, whereas I think pretty much like within the first week of Dev Squad, our coach was like, okay, you're doing that wrong. Like, next session, it's gone, and then wham, like you're just faster. So I kind of am sad that I didn't do that in my 1st year, but like, you know, can't change the past, and I'm here now, so yeah.
Is Oxford really the bubble it's made out to be?
Honestly, I think it depends on the person, and it depends on the college, like, and it depends on the course. Sorry, that's probably not a very ideal answer, but in my experience, it's as much of a bubble as you want it to be. So if you want it to be a bubble, it can be a very, very exclusive bubble. So if you want to get involved in like the union, the societies, the rowing, the degree stuff, the formals, the balls, all of that, you can, and you can 100% that there's so much going on there. You'll be busy every hour of the day, and it will be a bubble. But equally, I know plenty of people that are kind of, if you want to kind of dip in and out, so that's something I try and do, like, because I'm, I have a lot of close friends at home, and I kind of, so I try and keep it as something I can dip in and out of. But having said that, I think what I've found hard is more like the academic bubble than the social bubble, because it's just really hard to explain to like family and friends from home that I can't just have a weekend away, like I can't. So like I know that quite a normal thing is like friends coming to visit you at uni and stuff like that, but like the prospect, like the idea that some of my best friends could just come and stay with me from Monday to Wednesday is just out of the question when you've got like 40 contact hours a week. Like, it's just, and also in your free time you just have to work or something. It's quite hard. So in that sense, I think it can be a bit of a bubble.
Yeah. Describe your training camp experience.
God. I wonder who asked these. I mean, so the Oxford women's lightweights training camp was on the Tideway, famously beautiful January Tideway. So like training camp experience was character building, brain chemistry changing, to say the least. I think like actually one of the most kind of formative rowing experiences of my life was like on the final day of training camp. Like I was in an 8, like they'd split us into 2 8s at that point, and in my 8, 2 girls were injured, so we were gonna like take it out in a 6 plus, but then during the outing another girl became injured, so we had to go into like rolling 4s in an 8. It was like upstream against the tide or something, like it was like 2 6K pieces, and my hands were wrecked. Like I was like bleeding everywhere. It was so horrible, and I was just like me and Georgia in stroke, like, and I was in 7. We were just like, this is changing our life. Like, and then yeah, and that was a formative experience. But yeah, I mean, I guess it gave us tideway experience, so all good boat race prep.
The lightweight race obviously didn't go how you'd hoped. What does a debrief after a race like that look like?
It looks like very emotional. We actually haven't had our debrief yet, because our coach has literally allowed us just so after the boat race, kind of it happens in the VAC anyway. So like most of us have to go home because Oxford like kick you out in the holidays. It's awful, but like yeah. So we have a bit of a break anyway, and then once we come back for kind of Bucks training, then we have a debrief. But like I guess we had like a mini debrief, and our coach like and a lot of us like admitted that at the end of the day, like once the dust settles, like we're all so proud of each other, and I don't think we could have rode it any faster than we did. So I think sometimes like that's in a debrief, like that's more important than how the outcome of the race is, like what you're saying about like the watts you're pulling. If the other boat is faster, it's faster. Like, and kudos to Cambridge. Like I just think we did the best we could. We'd trained the best we could. And it was just about kind of maybe acknowledging, like processing the sadness of losing, but also being proud of people and ourselves at the same time.
A bit of a more fun question. What's the best Cambridge College crew for a crew date?
Ooh. I guess like we haven't, so like the St. Hugh's sister college is Clare College, and I've met up with them a couple of times. Like we've gone to like Cambridge for little crew swaps and stuff, which has been fun. I know that like I've got a couple of friends at Girton, and they seem quite fun, but I don't think I have that much experience of Cambridge crew dates, so I don't actually know. Provisionally, maybe I'll just say Clare College because that's the one I have experience.
Where in the US do you want to visit?
Oh, I don't know if that has context either. I want to. Who asked that? Like
Vincent Tang.
Oh yeah, no, he's my friend. Because I was gonna say LA, like he's in LA.
Okay.
But yeah, like I was initially looking at actually postgrads courses in the US, but I guess I'd have to probably give up rowing because I know that you can't really row as a postgrad there, like at least in women's sides, which is a shame. But yeah, LA definitely.
What was the process to keep everyone calm and focused before the boat race?
So we did a lot of planning as to maybe like, so since maybe Quintin, even like before that, even like the first all season, every time we did our race, the coach kind of said like, remember, like we'll have the boat race in March, like register what your body and your mind's doing now, register how you're reacting to each other. So by the time it got to boat race day, we kind of all knew each other's types of nervous. So it's like, I know that this person gets really quiet, this person gets quite touchy, this person gets really chatty, like, and I think that helped us kind of stay calm. We also had quite an early race, so our race time is at 10:20 and we were waking up at 4 a.m. Had a nice little pre-paddle at like 5, and then we had about 3 hours to kill between like after weigh-in was 6:30 and then boating was 9:30. So yeah, like 3 hours of just kind of chilling out, which really helped, I think. So I'd recommend like for race nerves having as much time. Personally, I really liked having that time to just zone in, and then it means you can kind of have your race food, like get out any nerves, like verbalize any nerves, discuss a race plan if you want, and then like it also means that there's enough time to have a proper like hype up if you want it. So yeah.
I'll slightly adapt this one. when is Oxford going to win the lightweight birth race?
Dread to think what the original one was for that.
Thanks, Louis.
I would say the thing is so I was looking at postgrad courses, right? And I was looking at like a couple in Cambridge because there are ones that I really want to do that. And then I was like, this is just how the laws of fate work, that if I suddenly went to Cambridge, like Oxford would just start winning. Like they just would. That's how it would work. But like from maybe a more evidence-based answer, I personally think that if there's ever a sign that Oxford needs merged squads and like a more collaborative rowing system, the year that they get an entire clean sweep, including every reserve race and the veterans race, is probably a sign. Like, so I'd say that realistically, the lightweights do have a good chance of winning next year. If you can project, like, say we close 9 lengths this year. So we've only got 6 to close this year. So if we close another 9 or 10, then that's free up. So maybe we'll win next year. But I think overall, like, one of the reasons I think Cambridge won basically is because they have the advantages of the merged squad, which means all of the kind of tideway knowledge and the technique and the tideway rowing and I know the psychology, everything is just shared, which is just really good.
Yeah.
Same
That's
as Brooks
something
as
that-
well, actually.
Yeah, Maddie was saying that a lot as well. She was definitely singing the praises of the Cambridge merged squad. And I guess that kind of links on to the next question as well. Are there any improvements you'd like to see in the Ox setup to be competitive next year?
Yeah. So I guess like I think I'd like to see more collaboration between the squads. Because even just things like even if the athletes never need to know, even just the coaches sharing data could be so useful. And like sharing telemetry, sharing like I know money for kind of boat maintenance and that sort of thing. It just kind of the little things behind the scenes that add up. Also things like side-by-side racing and training. I don't know if Cambridge did that, but for me, I know that it's probably one of the most, like whenever we did some battle paddling, like we did some sessions battle paddling Osiris and stuff, and coming back to the kind of sports psychology stuff, like I don't know if it was a mental thing, but the whole boat just moved so differently and like it's just kind of incomparable to if you're just solo training. So I think that's something that I think could improve as well.
Yeah, that's why Brooks always do side-by-side stuff.
Yeah,
because it works.
And it always gets announced on the Henley commentary. It's like, and there, Brooks famous for its side-by-side or something like that. Yeah, we get it. You said that last year and the year before.
And final question, and I guess I can get your opinion on this. When is the Oxford University Lightweight Women's Boat Club coach going to be fired?
Who was that? Which one of the potential applicants was it?
Guess.
Rory or Hugo?
No.
Chris.
Toby.
Toby. Oh
Lassen.
wow! I didn't know he was a potential applicant for the job. But yeah, he has the 3 aforementioned names to contend with there. But
You think that's
I think
on the cards?
I genuinely don't know, because it's the coaching system at Oxford is very weirdly run. So like, first of all, the decisions are like, there are so many different committees. So there's like, this is why it also isn't a merged squad, because it's not as simple as like the students being like, we want it to be a merged squad and then it merging. Like there's like kind of the millions of pounds of funding that comes from ALRA, the Oxford University Rowing Association, which is responsible for kind of, and like the donors. So like, especially if someone's like donating like 25 million pounds a year or something, they're like, yeah, we don't want it to be merged. Then what are you going to do? Like, so I think in terms of like who controls the coaches, like the coaches' positions, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, also I would say like our coach doesn't deserve as much criticism as she's getting, because again, like it was one of her first years coaching a tideway boat race for the lightweights. Whereas Cambridge, they had like 77 years of tideway boat races on their side. So like, and also I think credit to our coach for taking a squad of literally around 20 athletes, only about 12 of which was seriously competing for the 8 seats in the blue boat, and then like improving us. Like I know that my 2Ks come down by over a minute since this time last year, so like that's quite impressive, I would say, like from my coach. So I wouldn't say fire her too quickly, basically.
Okay. Well, that's positive. And that's all of the questions, actually. Thank you very, very much for coming onto the podcast to chat with us today. What you were saying was all very interesting. I think people listening in can definitely try and apply some of those things into their own diets and things like that, and have a think about how they're applying themselves to training. So thank you for your insights there. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, I hope you have a good rest of the season, and maybe we'll see you at Bucks potentially.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, hopefully.
Awesome.
Once I
Oh, good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.